Hello, I'm Alex Kersten, host of the second biggest car YouTube channel on the internet. And one day, I hope to be as big and as strong as that guy from AutoTrader. Never gonna happen though, is it, mate? Sorry, Alex. Why am I doing this? Well, I'm just trying to make the point that dressing up one product as another is what Seat and Cupra have been doing for years. But they're not doing it anymore. This is the Cupra Formentor, the first ever Cupra that isn't a Seat with a different badge on it. Kinda. Whereas in the past you had Seat and Cupra versions of the same car, the Formentor is exclusively a Cupra, even if it is based on a Seat Ateca. This one has a 310 horsepower engine, plenty of room in the back, and is available for a very competitive £40,000. So, what is it? Well, it's a compact SUV, isn't everything, about the same size as a Seat Ateca. Funny coincidence that. The name we should talk about, Formentor, is apparently the same name as the most beautiful and wild cape on the Balearic island of Mallorca. And actually, beautiful and wild just about sums this car up because it is very good looking with some very wild styling cues. Let's start with the obvious, this logo. It's something you might expect to see on a superhero's belt or a Transformer's chest. Some might say it's quite childish, but I like it. Then again, I am childish, so that makes sense. The grille isn't massive by today's standards, but then there's a second lower grille underneath that gives it an extra air of menace. Plus it's full of lots of swoops and slashes and scoops, not just on the front, but also up here on the bonnet. It's a very aggressive looking car. The headlights are very cool as well. I love the DRL signature around here. And if you notice, that actually looks a bit like the Cupra logo. That's basically what McLaren do on their cars. If it's good enough for McLaren, then yeah, it's good enough for Cupra. And if you look closely at these headlights, it's full of lots of little intricate jewel-like detail around the outer edge. Very, very attractive looking front end. Let's talk about the paint options now. The only no-cost paint option is white. If you want this lovely Desire Red, well then that'll be an extra £800. Or you have a choice of grey, 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 or grey. I'm not kidding, there's about 40 different shades of grey. All right, there is a black and a blue, but both of those look kind of grey as well. If you love grey, you're gonna love this car. The wheels, 18s come as standard, but these are the optional 19s, and they look a bit like, if you're an old Max Power fanboy like me, TSW Venoms from back in the day. If you remember, TSW Venoms were what everybody put on their Golf GTIs, Astra GTEs, XR3Is, and clearly somebody at Cupra was into their TSW Venoms. I salute you, sir or madam. Around the back, sloping roofline, quite sporty. Bit of a spoiler going on at the top. A lovely, beautifully designed rear light which runs the full width of the rear, and actually at the edges that again mirrors the Cupra logo. Quad exhaust, and also a little bit of a diffuser going on down here, although I'm not sure how important rear downforce is for the average Cupra customer. But what is important is boot space, and there is plenty of that. Entry-level versions of the Formentor have a handy 450 litres of space, although this all-wheel drive model has to make do with 420. Unlike many cars, it even comes with the option of a spare wheel. In the second row, there's lots of leg and headroom for kids, grown-ups, and even fitness freaks. The Formentor has a lovely interior, which I'll tell you more about in a couple of minutes, because the first thing I noticed when I hopped inside was that this car has the biggest traction control button of any VW Group product I've ever seen. It would be a massive shame if somebody were to press it. Okay, let's not get our hopes up. This is a family car, so there's not going to be any drifting. It has to be pretty docile and easy to live with, and actually for the most part, it is. Cupra will sell you a variety of engines in the Formentor, all the way from a 1.4 litre petrol with 150 horsepower to a 2 litre petrol with 310 horsepower, which is the one I'm in today, the big boy. What's it like to drive? Well, first impressions are that it's very good. The seating position is actually excellent. The steering wheel is exactly where you expect it to be, which sounds weird, but it's not twisted off to the left or right in a weird way or canted off to either side. It's right there in front of you. Some cars aren't, believe it or not. And the pedals are perfectly positioned and perfectly spaced. As for the seats themselves, well, you get these sporty bucket seats with enormous amounts of support on either side. The seats are electrically adjusted, so you can move them forward, backward, up or down, and they have a memory feature with 3 different settings. One for mummy, one for daddy, and one for the kid. I've just moved this seat all the way up to its highest possible setting, and actually it doesn't feel like a big SUV. You get a decent view of the road. You know exactly where the edges of the car are, and it's easy to place. But if you're expecting this to be, you know, the kind of car that allows you to lord it over everyone else, it's not really that kind of vehicle. It actually feels like a big hatchback. The steering is manually adjusted, and there is plenty of adjustment in there, so it's nice and easy to get comfortable. I also like the fact that even though this is a Volkswagen Group car, they haven't gone for those silly capacitive buttons on the steering wheel. These are physical buttons, and that means that it's not that easy to accidentally press them as you can do in something like a Golf. You also get, look at this, a physical volume knob on the steering wheel. You don't get that in most other VW cars, and it makes a big difference, I think, because you don't get it on the center console. As for the steering itself, well, it's nice and light and accurate, and the turning circle is surprisingly good. As for refinement, well, listen, pretty quiet, isn't it? It's not bad at all. In fact, the look and feel of the cabin as a whole is surprisingly upmarket. Yes, it does have a few bits you might find on many other VW Group products, but it has its own charm. There's also some quite premium touches. The materials in the door, that's leather. You get leather on the dashboard. You also get some plasticky elements, but it's nice plastic. There's ambient lighting, and that's not just there for show either. The ambient lights run from the doors all the way around the top of the dashboard and then back down again. And the lights in the doors actually work as part of the blind spot indicator system. That big light across the top of the dashboard is quite useful as well. That flashes to let you know that you might be about to have an accident. In terms of the infotainment display, well, it's massive and it looks great as well. The graphics and the animations are really, really sweet. But it's quite tricky to wrap your head around. And listen to this noise. Isn't that the most annoying sound in the world to let you know when you've sort of touched an option? And also, because it's a VW car, it also has the capacitive touch buttons for adjusting your volume instead of a physical knob. And listen to this. When you're turning the volume up, you get that really annoying sound. It sounds like an old school typewriter. Plus, to change things like the temperature, you've got to press capacitive buttons. And again, it's... Why is it making that noise? It just sounds horrendous. They need to get rid of that. It's so bad. But yeah, again, VW product. So many flaws and annoyances in the way that you interact with it, but over time, I imagine you can wrap your head around it. What's good is that the Formentor drives really well. It has a range of driving modes, including Comfort, Sport, and Cupra, with the car becoming more responsive the higher up you go. But surprisingly, for a car with over 300 horsepower, it's never uncomfortable, thanks to some very fancy suspension technology. So this car has the DCC, the Dynamic Chassis Control, which lets you choose from 14 different levels of suspension comfort. In the most comfortable setting, it's so soft, it's so smooth, honestly, it rides over imperfections in the road in a very impressive way. Cupra is the sweet spot, but if you want to go more aggressive than that, for some strange reason, then there are a couple of levels beyond that. Let's talk about the engine, which is by far the best bit of this car. It's essentially the same engine you get in the Golf R, but here it makes slightly less horsepower, but it's still massively powerful. Torque is rated at 400 Newton meters, and it pulls from around 2,000 RPM all the way up to around 6,000 RPM and just feels massively strong. It's a proper point-to-point assassin, this car. Get it slowed down for the corner, turn it in, and accelerate out. And it just launches itself along the road with surprising ferocity. So Cupra claim this thing can do 155 miles an hour flat out, They also claim that it can do 0 to 62 in 4.9 seconds. Should we find out if that's true? Yeah, why not? Before we do that, quick sound check. Not so bad. Not so much in the cabin though. It's a bit quiet in here, but here we go. Ready, steady. Oh! It's quick. It's quick. The actual drag timer has flown all the way into the passenger seat. Let's see if it managed to pick up a time. 0 to 62 in 4.88 seconds. They reckon 4.9. They're rounding up. This is a quick car. Only slight problem, makes a bit of a weird noise when you're on it. Like, it sounds like a 4-cylinder engine from the outside with a few pops and bangs. Inside, it's got this artificial noise to it. It sounds like a flat 6. That's weird. Weird but quick. The brakes definitely deserve a bit of a shout out as well. They are really good. Nice and easy to modulate, and also very strong. Sometimes brakes in these performance cars can feel a bit too snatchy and grabby, and just not that natural, but this thing, they've dialed it in really nicely. As for the gearbox, well, it uses VW's omnipresent 7-speed DSG. It's a dual clutch box. Around town, it's smooth enough for sure, and it also gives you enough freedom to choose your own gears, although it does want to upshift automatically. It doesn't let you hang on to those gears and bounce off the rev limiter. But generally speaking, it's a decent box. Decent enough box, especially for something like this. Do you know what? On the whole, I really like the Cupra Formentor. I think it's very good looking. I think it's very practical. The technology is decent, apart from this typewriter noise, but you can turn that off. And it's also very fun to drive as well. They've done a great job with this thing. The biggest trick for me though is that for the first time it feels like its own thing. This doesn't feel like a Seat trying to grab your attention with a different badge. Will the real Cupra please stand up? I'd say they're standing pretty proud with this one.